It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege and honor of interviewing the Canada wrestler Olympian Dori Yeats. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in the sport of wrestling?
Yeah, so both my parents are super athletic. My mom is Hungarian and she did gymnastics for the Hungarian national team. And my dad competed as a wrestler for Canada at 5 different Olympic Games. So when I was young, my mom forced all the kids to do gymnastics, I guess, hoping she could live vicariously through us to the Olympic dream of a gymnast. But around the age of 14, I realized probably wasn't going to happen for me in gymnastics, but I still kind of had that burning desire to go to the Olympics. And obviously with my dad being a 5-time Olympian in wrestling, I thought this could be a good sport to try. And it was.
What was that like, obviously following your father in his wrestling career and then obviously becoming a wrestler yourself?
It was great. I mean, my dad had a lot of opportunities to coach me and travel the world with me. And then even just having somebody at home to get advice from, I consider myself very lucky.
Of course, what was it like growing up in that family of a wrestler and then one day becoming a wrestler and making the national team for the first time?
I think my family is incredibly competitive. We're 4 kids. All of us did sport, still do sport, and it was just sort of part of the family culture. Like, you do well in school, you play a musical instrument, but number one is sport, and you sort of plan your life around that. So my mom, she works as a piano tuner, and that means that she gets to make her own schedule, and she literally did that on purpose so that she could take all of her 4 kids to every sporting event that they were going to, because that was for her just the greatest priority. So it was just kind of part of the family life. Like, sport was number one.
In 2010, what was it like going to the Youth Olympics in Singapore?
That was a very, very fun experience, because I remember those were the inaugural Youth Olympics. So that was the first time they did it. And my coach at the time found out about it in the corner of some unheard of magazine. He was like, "This looks like an interesting competition for you." And I just remember that was after I had been wrestling for maybe 2 years or so. And I hadn't done a competition yet on the global stage. I had done nationals, provincials. I think I went as far as doing like Pan American, maybe some tournaments in Europe, but I'd never competed against like everyone in the world. And then this was the first opportunity where I could do a sort of world championship level for my age group. And the qualification process started about 4 or 5 months before the games. And each step of the way, I was pretty nervous. I really wanted to qualify. And I kept kind of surprising myself, like I won the nationals, I won the Pan American championships, and these were the qualification tournaments, and it all went pretty smoothly. And I thought, hey, I have a pretty good shot at winning this. Like, first time competing on the global stage, I think I could do well. And then I went out there and I won. But it was definitely nerve-wracking, and I didn't know what to expect, because it was my first time. But it was just kind of a surreal experience. Like, even just having the media there, which I wasn't used to, because I hadn't competed anywhere where it mattered enough for the television to show up. And then, for like CBC Canada to be there interviewing me after I won the gold medal. Like, honestly, the interview is kind of cringy and funny. Like, I just had no idea how to answer questions, and I was just giggling and laughing. I was like 17 years old. So it was all around a very good experience, good sort of step into the world stage of wrestling.
Of course, at the age of 17, what was that like, obviously getting that stage of being on the competitive side of world wrestling?
Sorry, the question being at the age of 17?
Mhm.
Uh, well, I suppose on one hand, I was still young and obviously a bit immature, and there was like a lot of growing up to do and stuff. But I think gymnastics is definitely a sport that forces you to grow up quickly. I mean, a lot of the girls who go to the Olympics in gymnastics are, 16 years old or younger. So the fact that I competed in gymnastics for 10 years before becoming a wrestler, I think had that maybe maturity to compete. I mean, when I was 14, the last year that I was competing as a gymnast, I was considered senior. Like at 14, you're a senior. So I had already kind of, I guess all I could say is at 17, even though it is young, I felt like, this is where I should be.
Of course, what was it like getting you ready for the Golden Grands award
I'm not sure I know that award. Golden Grand Award?
in 2018?
I don't think I'm not sure I know that award. I'm sorry.
What was it like, obviously going for the Golden Grand Prix?
Oh, the Golden Grand Prix, like the wrestling tournaments.
Mhm.
Um, well, I'm not really sure because in wrestling, I like maybe now things have changed a little bit, but back when I was wrestling, like the Grand Prix and the Golden Grand Prix, they weren't that big of a deal. Like the fact that they were considered Grand Prix didn't matter all that much. But by 2018, I wasn't wrestling anymore. I retired in just end of 2017.
What was that like leading into the 2016 season, preparing for your Olympic run?
Probably the most stressful few months of my life. I knew how well positioned I was to make my dream a reality, and also being fully aware that the Olympics being every 4 years, you never know what's going to happen. You have to seize these opportunities, especially seeing how in 2020 COVID hit, and like that's just an example of something that can happen. But in other situations, like I retired in 2017 before COVID, and the reason I retired was due to injury. So like I was fully aware leading into the 2016 season that like if I don't seize this opportunity, I might not have it ever again. And so that kind of put a lot of internal pressure on myself. Obviously, my friends and family all thought I had a pretty good shot at going to the Olympics and performing well, but I just really wanted to make my dream a reality. And every single day waking up, making sure that I'm doing all the right things to get there. It was a very challenging few months.
Of course, leading into the Olympics, what was it like going to the Pan American Games and performing in Toronto?
That was a very good warm up, and that's how we treat it. Like for the Pan American Games, it's anytime there's games at the end, it's always sort of a bigger deal. Media is there, all the sports, like all the different sports teams are there, so it's not only wrestlers, which is what we're used to whenever we go to championships. And the fact that it was in Toronto, obviously the media coverage would be a lot greater. So my team and I, we really just treated that as a warm up. Like, okay, like here's how you will get ready and get used to the media attention, the interviews, and basically just all the eyes that are going to be on you at an event like the Pan American Games, which is like a little bit less pressure than the Olympic Games. So it was just like the perfect warm up a year before. We were able to identify like some problems, some gaps, and then just really focus on those for the year leading up to the Olympics.
How is that like, obviously preparing and competing on Toronto in your home area?
That was really fun. I was for probably the first time ever, almost, well, that I could think of, I had friends actually show up to watch me wrestle. Because apart from maybe my first year or two wrestling, I didn't really have a lot of competitions anymore on home soil. Like, I'd compete in the Canadian Championships, which was the qualifier every year for the World Championships. But, those would often be in, Calgary, Edmonton, or cities that are far away from where I live, which is Montreal. And so the Pan Am Games being in Toronto, which is only a 6-hour drive from Montreal. So like, something that some people are willing to do. And then I have friends living in Toronto, having friends and family come and watch me and cheer me on, and then, be there to celebrate after I won. It was just like a very different, but also fun experience, because I don't usually get to share those with people. So I cherish that.
What was it like the first time you got to put on that Canada singlet?
Well, I actually had a teammate. So when I first started wrestling, I didn't have a singlet. I just didn't own any. And I think I got a couple, generic ones, but I had a teammate who was already competing for Team Canada, and she had so many that she was like, okay, like, you don't have singlets, here are a few. So like, I obviously like was wearing them before I earned them, let's say, because I had a teammate who just sort of gave them. So I honestly don't even remember when I would have worn a singlet for the first time, but I guess the one distinction would have been when they started putting our last names on the back of the singlet. I think there's like a certain level of like pride for sure, like going into matches knowing that like, you're representing Canada and like your name's on the singlet, like you're the rep at this weight class. And then I think when I was in high school, like being a little bit cocky, like not everybody had represented Canada yet. So going to sort of not even international competitions, like just domestic ones, getting some practice in, and I'd be wearing my Team Canada singlet with my name on the back. Like those were definitely the moments that come to mind when you say, what did it feel like wearing it for the first time? I definitely felt like proud enough to wear it at tournaments like that. But afterwards, it was sort of just all I ever wore. So you definitely lose a little bit of that prestige that goes with it. You're like, well, this is what I'm supposed to wear. This is my outfit. This is my costume.
Of course, when you made the Rio team, what was that like going to Rio and going to the Olympics and competing for the first time?
Well, that was obviously my dream come true. So flying out to the Olympics, I think every part of the way I was like, I can't believe this is happening right now. Like, obviously I was like nervous, but at the same time I was just like, like I'm on a plane going to compete at the Olympics. Like every step of the way. Then the opening ceremonies, I'm like, I can't believe I'm here right now. And then, just like every step of the way, there was always a moment of like, I still can't believe I'm here right now. But end of the day, it was kind of just like any other competition, all the same competitors, the same warm up, the same game plan. So like there were moments of like, I guess I was just like in awe of the fact that like I had a dream that just seemed so outlandish that I've actually achieved. But in order to perform, you also have to kind of step out of that bubble. Like you're not going to perform by being googly eyed. So apart from those moments, focused on what I had to do, which I guess takes away from the glamour a bit, but it was great.
What was it like, obviously, getting to compete against those teams like US and China?
Well, I guess at first I remember like when I was really young and I started competing internationally, I remember being a little bit more nervous, let's say, because I wasn't used to it. And then I just remembered like, I don't even remember how we worded it, but I had a coach at one point tell me, like these people aren't robots, they're not aliens. Like they're showing up with the same amount of, nervousness and whatnot as you have. Like they've trained. Like there's nothing about them that's fundamentally all that different. Like they're just human beings, and don't make them into more than they are. And then like later, it wasn't so much like what country they were from, or it was sort of more like specific names of people. Like these are the people you have to beat. These are the people who are performing at your weight class. Like, you kind of get over the novelty of what country they're from. It's more like these are the people you need to beat, and here are their styles.
What were some of the things that you learned during your time as a Canada wrestler?
Wow. A lot of life skills, I'd say. I mean, like some of the more transferable ones are just like the work ethic, the dedication, and organization. Like you're juggling so many things while you're an athlete, sport, and then I was studying at the same time, family, friends, and just like, like all the different things that you have in life. But there's only so many hours in a day. So if you want to get everything done and get it done at a high level, you do have to be incredibly organized. And that involves, eating the right thing, eating at the right time, sleeping enough, And you can't do it if you're just sort of winging it. You have to be incredibly organized and then have the dedication to stick to the goal and then have the work ethic to bring it all back together. So those are all things that have, I think, stayed with me and benefit me a lot in my life right now, as I'm working and, you know, balancing whatever else is going on. But besides that, I think I have a pretty good understanding of just having a healthy lifestyle, and I gain the knowledge of how to train properly, what kind of exercises I want to do, how to eat properly. And then even when you retire from elite sport, these are all really important things, like to stay active in your life, and stay active as you get older when your body starts kind of refusing to do as much as you want it to do. Being able to have that knowledge of exercise science is incredibly useful, I think. So I think all in all, I learned a lot from wrestling and very grateful I did it.
What were some of your routines and rituals like during your time as a wrestler?
Well, before competition, one of the interesting things, I suppose, was I'd get pretty nervous. Like I would just get incredibly anxious, and it would affect my sleeping and my eating. And there would just be like, there's just like a lot of unnecessary stress, I suppose, which is like comes with the territory. But I struggled with it for a while, and we came up with a program for like the week before a competition, the day before a competition, of like, you know, how should I eat? Because when I'm nervous, I don't really want to eat. So then like finding what kind of foods am I willing to eat when I don't have an appetite that will give me the energy to perform and like, you know, get through the trainings. But then also coming up with specific playlists on like my iPod while I was warming up and things like that to get me into the right mind frame. So I would spend a little bit of time coming up with this playlist of songs that, you know, really pump me up. So like right before a match, for instance, with the 10 minutes before a match, I would play these songs that I knew would like just really get me into the zone. But then if I knew that the match was in like 3 hours, I would have songs that I knew that would really like calm me down. So music really helped me. And then also working on various sort of like breathing exercises, making sure my exhales were longer than my inhales, during times where like the match was far enough away that, you know, being anxious or being nervous wasn't benefiting me. I needed to calm down. But then on the flip side, if the match is coming up, how can I breathe in such a way that, you know, amps me up and gets me ready for, you know, what I'm about to do? Like a 6-minute match, it's not nothing. It's like a 6-minute sprint. Like, how do you just get yourself into that frame? So like, you know, music, breathing, what I ate, these were all sort of things that were completely figured out by the time I made it to the Olympics, which just like trial and error. And yeah.
How do you describe your wrestling style?
I would consider myself sneaky. So I was, you know, and like a more negative word to use would be maybe almost lazy. Like I would try to be very effective and efficient with what I decided to do and not do much beyond that. So there's like a lot of wrestlers who go in there with a lot of grit and strength and they kind of just bully you and push you around. That was like never really my style. I use a lot of movement, a lot of fakes, and then, you know, I would fake one way, go the other way. So these kinds of like setups where there's not a lot of energy involved. But then once I decided to attack, it was like very well thought out and it was really quick. And I think that was a great way for me to be successful at my weight class because I never cut weight. I was competing in the 69 kilogram division where a lot of girls weighed up to like 75 kilos. So like, sorry, that's like 152 pounds is my weight class. And girls would be 170, 175 pounds cutting weight to make my weight class. And I wasn't cutting any weight. So like I was small for the weight class. So the only way that I could beat people who are stronger than me was to be faster and to be clever. And that's kind of how my style developed.
How does it feel to add OLY behind your last name as an Olympian?
I thought it would be really cool. So like I have the certificate saying, you know, I'm allowed to do that and whatnot, but honestly, it's so, I suppose, unique and new that not a lot of people know what it even is. And so to be honest, I haven't really been signing off with the letters. I probably should start because obviously no one will ever know what OLY is if none of the Olympians actually do it, but kind of just feels a little cocky doing it. So yeah, I haven't been using it.
What was that feeling like when you received your Olympic ring and had the Olympic rings on it along with the maple leaf flag?
That was a pretty fun time. So we had our measuring for that done at the Olympic Games. I can't remember if they showed us what the ring would look like, but we officially received the ring a few months after the games. We went to Parliament, we got to meet the Prime Minister, and we were given our rings. And it was a pretty fun event, but I wouldn't say it was like the most standout. I think being at the opening ceremonies and like physically at the Olympics was sort of like the big like we made it moment. And then once it was finished getting the ring, it was a nice cherry on top. But I wouldn't say that was like any moment where I was like, wow, I went to the Olympics. It was like, no, I've already like lived that, you know?
What is that feeling like getting to meet your fans and having them ask for your autographs and photos?
That's like it's definitely a pretty fun feeling, especially at first, because you kind of feel a little bit like, why do you want my autograph? Like, I'm no one. But later, when you meet young wrestlers, especially, and they look up to you, like, I suppose I've asked different people for their autographs, like when I was a kid, and like that meant a whole lot to me and like inspired me. So if I feel like I'm doing that for someone else, like obviously it's a good feeling.
Who were some of the most influential people in your career?
My dad, for sure. Obviously, I followed in his footsteps, so he played a big role in inspiring me and motivating me to go in the direction that I went. I had a lot of teammates and coaches along the way that also were highly accomplished wrestlers. So I had a lot of really great role models around me to ask questions to. And like just not necessarily any specific person, but there are several athletes on Team Canada that performed quite well or got to a high level in sport while simultaneously pursuing academics and became, like doctors or lawyers. And kind of just hearing those stories and hearing it whenever times got really tough, especially with school. Like I studied engineering. It's a pretty hard program. And I was like, man, like this is so challenging. Like, can I do it? Is it even worth doing? Like I'm wrestling at the same time. Like are these things, worth balancing? I feel like I'm working so hard. But then like hearing about these other athletes who, actually medaled at the Olympics, or like, I didn't medal at the Olympics, like hearing people who did better than me at the Olympics and then became doctors and lawyers. I'm like, okay, honestly, like anything is possible. Like just put the hard work in and keep going. And kind of just like hearing those stories always gave me the push to make sure I achieved what I set out to achieve.
Who are some of the people that you look up to in the sport of wrestling?
Well, while I was competing, I looked up to my dad because he went to the Olympics 5 times, which was over 20 years. So that kind of gave me, he never medaled, but the fact that he stuck to it for 20 years just gave me an idea of like just resilience, like how to keep going at something, and how, there is, as much as it's like, seize every opportunity and, you never know if you'll make it to another Olympics again. There's also that idea of like, you could do this for as long as you want and you could achieve whatever you want. Like he kind of like balanced that idea. But then there's a few other wrestlers that are very successful in Canada. Tanya Verbeek, she went to 3 different Olympic games, medaled at all 3 of those games. She was one of the coaches on the coaching staff. There was Carol Wynn, who won gold in the Beijing Olympics and then won bronze at the London Olympics. And she was also very present at training camps and things like that. Martine Dugrenier is another one from Montreal, who's a multiple-time world champion. So there's just like so many, especially female wrestlers, that were just around me and like part of the coaching staff while I was on my journey towards the Olympics. So just seeing that kind of high level success and seeing how humble these women were, just how successful, and like obviously they have a wealth of knowledge to share too in terms of like technique and strategy. So I think I was very lucky at the timing when I was wrestling. There's just so many people around me that were so successful. I had a lot of help.
How was that transition like from going from being a wrestler to retired and getting into the corporate world?
Well, it was a very long transition because when I retired from wrestling due to injury in beginning of 2018, let's say, I was still finishing my bachelor's degree. So I didn't fully go into the corporate world right away. I had another year or 2 years before I finished my bachelor's degree. And actually at that point, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, because I still felt like I identified as an athlete, but I wasn't sure like where my passions were in the corporate world, and I hadn't had a chance really to do any internships or like explore that at all. So then I did a master's degree, which gave me 2 more years of school. So I did spend like a chunk of time after retiring staying in school, studying, figuring out where my interests were. And then only this year, this February, did I start working at my job as a consultant. And I feel like I'm pretty far removed at this point, 2022. So I'm like 6 years out from the Olympics, right? Like it has been a bit of time, but a lot of those qualities that I mentioned earlier, like work ethic, perseverance, focus, and these kinds of things that I developed as an athlete are incredibly useful today in like the work I'm doing. So yeah, the transition was very slow. So it's hard to speak of like what that was. Like I fully embraced the fact that I am no longer an athlete while I became, it wasn't like a harsh cutoff of like, I'm no longer an athlete. Now I'm a white collar worker. Like, so it's hard to answer the question, but I'm very happy where I am now. And I'm very happy with what wrestling has taught me and how well prepared I feel for the work I'm doing.
Of course, what are some of your future plans in the consulting side?
Well, I'm really interested in management. I feel like due to how organized I am and, like the efficiency that I've developed through being an athlete, like those are all qualities that translate really well. So, project management is sort of on my horizon, and then I guess I'll see where everything takes me, but I'm working right now in renewable energy, which I find super interesting. And like, I think, climate change and all the talks about the problems in the world, I think I'm in a field that's going to like really explode. So I feel like I'm well positioned, and I feel really comfortable presenting and explaining scientific ideas to like, the layman crowd. So I think I'm in a very good place, and I think I have pretty good chances to get ahead. I'm not quite sure which direction that is yet, though.
What advice would you give those people that are looking to get into college wrestling?
Well, yeah, obviously I'm from Canada, so I don't really know the scene in the United States and like college wrestling. So like I started wrestling when I was in high school, and it wasn't easy because the province that I live in actually doesn't have a ton of wrestling, so I had to go through clubs. But I mean, the advice I would give is to like just literally sign up and do it. Like right now, especially for women, like it's not a sport that's particularly saturated. Like if you go out there and you have the dream to do well and you put in the time and the effort, you have really good chances, because especially the fact that a lot of times men and women train together, having the ability or the chance to train alongside men and wrestle with men in practice, it'll just make your learning curve exponential. And then when you go and you compete against women, yeah, I think you'll have really good chances of success. That was sort of, I think, a big reason why I was successful was 90% of my training partners were men. So men are like physically much stronger. You have to wrestle in a way that if you want to win, if you want to be, obviously if you're wrestling against men and you're just like losing all the time, maybe it's not the best strategy, but if you could find a way to be successful against men, you have pretty good chances to be successful against women.
Of course, what advice would you give those people that are looking to go to the Olympics and represent their country, whether it's Canada or Team USA?
I guess the main piece of advice would be to not sell yourself short. Like I set this Olympic dream, and a lot of people thought it was, oh yeah, good luck. That's a big one. Good luck, but it's like, no, it's honestly doable for anyone. Like I was lucky I had somebody living in my house who had done it. So it was, I was able to be reminded, if he did it, I could do it. But I think a lot of people don't necessarily stick to their Olympic dream, or don't even set the Olympic dream, just because they think like it's insane. It's too big of a goal. But I don't think it is. Like if that's what you want to do, find a way to reach it. Like the resources aren't impossible. There are so many places now, like there are so many clubs and networks are just like, the world is becoming so small that you could just like find people that can help you get there if that's really what you want to do. So like I think people shouldn't sell themselves short. It's a dream it's big and it's going to take a lot of time and energy, but it's possible.
What advice would you give those Olympians that are transitioning from their sport to getting into the corporate world or even going back to school?
I think I would say there will be moments where you're going to be confused, or you're almost having like an identity crisis, because you identified as an athlete for so long, and having that transition, or just even interacting with people who haven't been through that level of pressure and stress, like there are so many things that you have to adjust to. And I think it's just, as long as you start the transition being fully aware that this might happen to you, and like don't freak out, like it's not going to be easy, and you're going to have times where like mentally you're just struggling, but just like if you're prepared for that, then I think you're
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.